Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto sucedoye alahadi samyao samputoche.
Namo sadanto sucedoye arahadi samyao sambuddhoshe.
无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。The unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma in 100,000 million eons is difficult to encounter. Now that I come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom the thus come one's true and actual meaning. Welcome everyone to tonight's sutra lecture. We will begin by reciting the name of the sutra, which is on the front of your sutra text, on the front cover. If it's your first time here, it's on just the front cover of your book. It says, Homage to the Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra of Great Expansive Teachings and the Ocean-Wide Flower Garland Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So we recite the Chinese 7 times, and that's right below. Okay. Namo Da Fang Guang Vo 华严经，华严海为佛菩萨。南无大放光佛，华严经，华严海为佛菩萨。南无大放光佛，华严经。华严海为佛菩萨。南无大放光佛，华严经。华严海为佛菩萨。南无大放光佛，华严经。华严海为佛菩萨。南无大放光佛，华严经。华严海为佛菩萨。南无大放光佛，华严经。华严海为佛菩萨。So good evening, everyone. All the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master and Dharma friends. Tonight we are going to investigate the Avatamsaka Sutra, also known as the Flower Garland Sutra. We're in Berkeley, California. Today is April 12th, 2014. And we're right now on the chapter called the 10 Grounds. We're on the 5th ground. The ground of, I think difficult conquest. Difficult conquest. And we're on page 55, 54 and 55. So if you can open your sutra text. We will begin from the last verse on page 54 and on page 55, just to continue on with the explanation that the nuns gave last week. So what we usually do is we recite the sutra text together, and since this section's in verse, I will try to chant the verse in a little bit of a melody, and you could try to follow. So I'll try my best. So we're starting with 菩萨住持. So that's where we're starting. 菩萨住持第五地，住持第五地，专修身上清净道，修身上清净道，只求佛法不退转，只求佛法不退转。思念慈悲无厌倦，思念慈悲无厌倦。Can we read the English together? When the Bodhisattva dwells upon this, the fifth ground, he progressively cultivates the way to ever higher purity. He resolutely seeks the Buddha Dharma and does not turn back. He keeps thoughts of kindness and compassion without ever growing tired.
Hello everyone. The monk that just introduced the lecture is Jin-Chuan to my right, and my name is Jin-He. Welcome to the night's lecture. Today is the 12th, a Saturday of April. And for those of you who are new and also the regular attendees of the Saturday night Avatamsaka Sutra lecture, what you just witnessed from the beginnings where there was the formal request for the Dharma is a ceremony that traces its roots right back to 2,500 or 3,000 years ago, depending on which Buddhist calendar that you use. That means it traces its roots right back to the time of the Buddha. And the whole purpose of the ceremony is so that when someone comes in from the outside and after going through whatever life that you have, when you come to the monastery, is it a chance to relax the mind and to concentrate, especially when it comes to the Buddha's the words. So you can imagine if the Buddha was here right now, if Jin-Chuan was the Buddha, we would all be paying very close attention to what he would have to say. So the ceremony before that is meant. Now everyone's looking at you like, oh.
There's a very big if there.
The Buddha's right behind us. So the purpose of the ceremony, as we shall see as we go through the text, is to bring the mind down to a place where you let go of everything that's outside. So all the worries, all the baggage of life should ideally be left at the front door, just like your shoes when you come in. You leave it all outside, and then you come in with an open mind, and a mind that's ready to pay close attention to the Buddha's words. And why I have decided to start the lecture tonight with this is because as we go through the text, if you listen really, really carefully, just like the Buddha's time, if you understand the Buddha's words, you could get enlightened tonight. You could. It all depends on the state of your cultivation. And it used to happen all the time. When the Buddha used to lecture, people would gain different levels of arhatship. Some of them would be able to actually end birth and death right on the spot just by listening to the Buddha's words. So we'll start by reciting again the sutra text that we'll go through tonight, and then when I tell you to pay close attention, you really need to pay close attention. Okay? So palms together if you wish. When the Bodhisattva dwells upon this, the fifth ground, he progressively cultivates the way to ever higher purity. So what does this mean? When the Bodhisattva cultivates the way to ever higher purity. To understand what purity is, we also need to understand the opposite of purity, which is the words defilement or filth are commonly used to explain things that are not pure. And to start this off, this is where you really need to pay close attention. I'll read what the Buddha has to say about defilement and filth. In short, there are only two things that you need to get rid of if you want to achieve nirvana. There's only two things. It's really, really simple. And the Buddha puts it in really beautiful form here. And this is the Shurangama Sutra that I'm going to quote. Okay? So if this is a time that you ever need to pay attention, I would say this is one of those times. Okay? And you can feel free to ask questions, or ask me to pause, or ask me to repeat. Okay? But because living beings, from time without beginning, have pursued forms and sounds, and have followed their thoughts as they turn and flow, they still are not enlightened to the purity, wonder, and permanence of their nature. They do not accord with what is eternal, but chase after things which are subject to production and extinction. Because of this, they are born again and again and become mixed with defilement as they flow and turn. But if they reject production and extinction and uphold true permanence, an everlasting light will appear, and with that, the sense organs, defiling objects, and consciousnesses will disappear. The appearance of thought becomes defilement, the emotions of the consciousness become filth. I'll repeat this again. The appearance of thoughts becomes defilement, the emotions of the consciousness become filth. If you stay away from these two, then your Dharma eye will accordingly become pure and bright. How could you fail to accomplish unsurpassed knowledge and enlightenment? Anyone here enlightened yet? If you are, I know you won't put up your hands. And we'll come to that as well later. So, I'll repeat this again. The appearance of thought becomes defilement. The emotions of the consciousness becomes filth. So this is what it means when, as we just read through the text of tonight's sutra, the Bodhisattva progressively cultivates the way to ever higher purity. He leaves behind thoughts, and thoughts meaning the thoughts from our sixth consciousness. If you're familiar with the Yogacara school of Buddhism, the sixth consciousness is the mind that we use to think, our deliberating mind, our discriminating mind. So the Bodhisattva does not mistake those thoughts to be who he is. That's the first thing that he does, to be more pure. And the second thing that he does is he does not get mixed up with emotions. So it is not to say that a Bodhisattva is like a piece of rock. No emotion, just pointing to you. But he's not ruled by emotions. You still have emotions, but the emotions do not control you. And what do we mean when we say emotions start controlling you? A lot of crazy things happen to people when they are ruled by emotions. And when emotions get too great, they become afflictions, which was what we spoke about 2 weeks ago. We had a list of afflictions, and because we didn't have enough time, we will revisit the list in a short while. But before we go to that, I'll just stay on purity again. So what does thoughts mean? Thoughts refer to our false thinking, our thoughts that incessantly come up all the time. If any of you have meditated before or tried any form of meditation, you will know what I mean. As you're sitting there, your mind will wander. As you hear sound, like the car that just passed, you'll be wondering, who is that? Or you instantly recognize that there's a sound of a car. If your phone rings, you'll be wondering who is calling you. So that's false thinking. It goes on and on and on. And then emotions. The emotions that we have, the Bodhisattva leaves behind because he wants to be more pure. He doesn't want to be ruled by emotions. So what harms people most, and this is the Brahma Master, and he says, the origin of filth is emotions. So if you can overcome emotions, or you can be in control of emotions, you will not have filth, you will be going towards purity. And the Brahma Master says, what harms people most is their emotions. And you can see that around us. Most headlines today are caused by people who are ruled by emotions, especially the headlines that involve some kind of dysfunctional behavior in families to the point of murder. Or I just saw in the headlines some person just confessed to being a mass murderer. For that's being ruled by something else other than pure thinking. The Realm Master says, no matter what situation they encounter, they react with emotion. So the problem of emotion causes people to be born in a swoon and die in a dream. So if you're forever ruled by emotion, you're always as if in a dream, because you're not letting your true mind, you're not seeing things as they really are, you're seeing things through a lens of emotion. So it says, how could you not obtain unsurpassed wisdom and enlightenment if you stay away from these two? Yep. Do you want to?
So we were just speaking about the idea of purification, and I think actually that's a really important principle. Basically, when you really look at it, our thoughts and you could say attaching or getting kind of really involved with our emotions is actually a form of confusion, a form of we use word like filth, but like trash. It's like garbage, it's like garbage in the mind. And so we actually need to just like we take out the garbage, every week to put on the front of the driveway to get the garbage collector to pick it up. We have to take out the trash in our own minds and take it out. Because oftentimes we think our thoughts and our emotions are who we are, and we hold on to them. So we just keep collecting garbage. So we collect garbage after garbage, and we end up having a lot of garbage. So we want to, at some point, actually empty it out. What we find when we empty out the garbage is that we're a lot freer. If this whole building, this room was filled with garbage, I think it'd be a pretty miserable place to stay in. I think I gave the story at lunchtime. I think it's worth repeating. We recently went to we have a property down near Boulder Creek. It's in the Redwood Forest. It's a very beautiful piece of land. And we were thinking it's probably those, there were some drug users on methamphetamines. And they go and buy, they basically get paid to do trash runs. So they pick up somebody's home's trash, then they go to the dump yard and they dump the trash there. But so they save on the dumping fee, they basically go on somebody's property and they dump the trash there. So what we found is there's a huge pile of trash, I don't know, 4 cubic tons or something. Basically a lot of trash. And we had a whole bunch of our community go down there and pick up the trash there. When you go there, it feels very defiled. Like you look at this place and you see a mattress, you see a bathtub, you see people's, paper and tissue paper and whatever. It's all scattered all over this very pristine natural environment. And so it really looks polluted, what humans do. Beer cans, shotgun shells. And so we spent one day with 50 of the community, went down and just cleaned up there and left afterwards and filled up one big container, one of these huge containers. And so recently we just went down there yesterday actually, with a small group just to take a look at the property. And we saw there are some people who are still throwing some trash on the property, but not very much. But the land actually has returned to a state of greenness and natural beauty. Where there used to be a huge pile of trash, where the mattress and bathtub were, now there's a huge pile of, all this miner's lettuce is growing there. One of the people one of the laymen who went on the trip says, actually, you can eat that. Although we thought we probably don't want to eat that because before there's a bunch of trash there. But so that's the idea, is that there's a sense that we return to purity. If we can remove the trash in our minds, naturally our nature is this pure kind of awakened nature. And so what I'm going to go over is the afflictions. Do you have something to add?
Another way to look at defilement and trash is to use the word attachments. Attachments, as you will see, as Jin-Chuan goes through the list of defilements or afflictions, is that it all comes from attachments. If you were to trace the root of every affliction that we have, it comes from attachments.
So just to give another little bit of a preamble to going to this list. So recently we had a class at the 60,000 Buddhas talking about actually this list of afflictions as well. And so one of the nuns was explaining the Dharma. I thought she gave a very good kind of explanation of cultivation. She was saying, we talk about seeing the Buddha nature. Everyone wants to see the Buddha nature. And so she's like, okay, so what does it look like? And I was like, so, what does it look like? Do people see it? So well, actually, for most of us, when we start cultivating, what we mostly see are the afflictions. And that's actually the beginning of cultivation, is really looking at our afflictions, recognizing them, and changing them. That's the first step. And that's why we talk about them quite a lot, is because it's really, if we don't apply our energy in recognizing what those are and changing them for the better, then we actually don't really start in cultivation. We just kind of always just kind of staying in one place, just kind of doing something, because we never recognize the first step, which is changing ourselves for the better. And the Buddha gave very clear places that we can look to improve. So that's why this list of afflictions is actually very useful. It's not to make us more depressed or to make us feel miserable about ourselves. It's just you could say a kind of like a signpost saying, oh, look here. And if you don't do this, you'll be a lot happier and be a lot freer. So that's the spirit. So where we left off last time, I think we talked a little bit about jealousy. And I think that's one of the emotions people experience, and experience usually as a very negative emotion. It's jealousy. It has this kind of poisonous, bile-like flavor to it. I think people experience it. It's something that I think most people don't like, but we get caught in that emotion and it kind of consumes the mind. And I remember, at least for myself, particularly when I was in high school, actually it was one of the reasons that propelled me into the spiritual path, was because I realized I actually had really kind of strong jealous thoughts towards my best friend in high school. And I thought that was really strange. I'll say that it was really uncomfortable. It was somebody I actually really cared about, almost took to be like a fellow brother growing up. And when I had thoughts like that, I thought that was really uncomfortable. And also actually created actual actions from that, which I could watch myself doing, and I could see, ooh, that's not very wholesome. And so that really caused me to reflect on what the meaning of what I was doing was about. What was society doing that was feeding us? For instance, I'll say the values of competition and kind of trying to be number one, trying to be the best. Those values aren't actually very good values. It's actually can breed a kind of competitiveness and fighting, which leads to these kind of afflictions, like jealousy. Rather than say, if we were to cultivate a heart of sympathetic joy in Buddhism, is basically when other people are happy, we're happy for them. I always thought that was a very wholesome quality, is basically rejoicing in other people's happiness. That's a cultivated skill. So when other people are happy, you really have to have a heart of happiness. And I think that comes from a fundamentally different approach to how you see the world, to not to see the world through the lens of competing with the other people, to not say, oh, I need to be better than him, or we're trying to fight over for little limited resources, we're fighting over it, but rather say, oh, okay, especially if you're a quote unquote have aspirations to follow the Bodhisattva path, we make these Bodhisattva vows of saving all living beings. So if the other person's doing well, you should be very happy because that person's fulfilling your vow. They're on the path to becoming a Buddha, so they're that's much closer. So I always remember the quote the Master Hua said is that he always just hopes other people will be better than him. He doesn't want to be number one. He wants other people to be better than him. So I think that's a really good attitude to cultivate. It's something that we don't get out in the world. I don't think we ever hear that. Let other people have the benefits. Just don't go to be number one yourself. Let other people be number one.
And we actually have a video to prove to you that it's better to let people go first than to enjoy the benefits yourself. But you'll have to wait till the end.
Yeah, we'll have a nice video about that. So that's one, which is jealousy. And I think if you have that affliction, and I think we'll look in our minds, we'll all see that we have some affliction that kind of gets us. So what happens is when you look at this list, maybe without affliction, well, we don't have that one, but we have another one of these. So we kind of work on each one as we see it in our own process. And so if it's not jealousy, this next one on that list was stinginess, or basically not being able to give. And I think we also can recognize the destructiveness of being really stingy. In our culture, we have, I think, examples like, I can think of Uncle Scrooge in the Christmas Carol, the kind of penny pinching, kind of rigid, not very happy, kind of jaw clenched, kind of, skins and bones, kind of, living actually a very impoverished life, in fact, because they are so penny pinching. But the idea of stinginess is basically the mind not willing to give. And again, actually, the videos are going to be about giving. And you'll see the joy that comes when one actually has an open heart to give. And again, it's a different value system. Is if we're trying to protect the self, try to get as much as we can for the self and hold on to it and protect and secure it. In fact, what happens is we become more and more miserable because we don't recognize that everything's in flux. We actually never can hold on to anything. So if we have that mentality of wanting to hold on and to attach, in fact, we're just creating more suffering for ourselves. So the more relaxed we can be, the more generous we can be, the more we can have an open heart and see others as connected with us, we will actually develop a much happier heart. I actually, on this trip down to Highway 9, one of the laymen was sharing me, there's an organization, UC Berkeley, called a Greater Good Science Center. And I guess what they're trying to do is use scientific means to prove like virtuous qualities. Like for instance, giving. They're like, wow, after all our research, we found that people who give are more happy. Or that wealth does not determine happiness. From all their studies, they realized that wealth does not determine happiness, which I think is something Buddhism would agree with. And I have to say though, that maybe that's the Dharma door for a lot of people because they need to have science prove that that's true. After doing all their social study and their analysis, they can say, oh yeah, if you're running after money as your main reason for existence, you probably won't be very happy. So the other ones I wanted to go over was a couple of the afflictions that I think are very prevalent now, especially in the younger generation, myself included, which is, I would say, I kind of group them. One is heedlessness. Heedlessness means kind of not being mindful, just kind of, most extreme would be saying you get drunk or you do something that intoxicates the mind, so you're completely heedless, you don't know what you're thinking anymore. There's a kind of like a restlessness, anxiety, and then there's scatteredness, distractedness. So these are 3 or 4 of the afflictions that are listed. And I think they almost all come together in modern society because of the way that technology, advertising, popular media is now, is that it's drawing us out into this world which is very distracted. And actually that's a very, very bad affliction because what that allows for is that we never really can reflect within and develop a concentrated mind to begin to uncover our inherent wisdom, to be able to see ourselves more clearly. Rather, we're always just on the surface. We're always very superficial. And what we find is that when we try to let go of those distractions, we are very uncomfortable because we become dependent on those distractions to give us a sense of activity and meaning in a way. It kind of gives us some, I'm doing something, I'm busy with doing something. Or rather, it takes us away from actually being able to say, I'm okay just as I am. And it's kind of a solitude or a silence and being able to reflect within. And so I would say that's really important for modern times, this kind of ability to reflect within.
Personally, I think MTV should take some of the blame. I'm about 40 years old, so I remember growing up without MTV, and then suddenly MTV came around. And the editing at MTV was very quick. Like, not as quick as now when it first started. Maybe an image would come on the screen for maybe a second and a half, or 2 seconds, or half a second. And it would, before you understand what's going on, it would disappear and be replaced by another scene. I remember my dad saying, before you want to know what they're showing you, they're changing it to something else. And now if you look at the editing of modern media, it is even quicker than that. Sometimes in trying to be more artistic, some directors flash something on that's not even half a second. It used to be called subliminal messaging, but now it's normal. And you're sitting, pop, 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 it's like, what's going on? I don't know, but it feels good. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I'll say coming to an environment like this, or actually just go out in nature, what you find is you kind of reclaim your senses. You reclaim your attention span. Yeah, you can reclaim your attention span, and kind of detox. And I think that's really valuable. That's kind of what the monastery is here for. That's hopefully if we can not burn up the world and not destroy our natural environment. Natural environment will still be there, but we can go there and kind of just spend some time out in nature in some peace and quiet, and not get pulled into the narrative of society, which is always asking us to be entertained. So what I see is basically society is kind of, it's a very sad narrative, I have to say. It's like you work really, really hard all the time to like make money, to then buy stuff, which is to entertain you with the rest of your free time. So you go and you work really hard to keep really busy, and then you watch movies in your spare time to kind of keep yourself engaged and entertained, and then you work really hard, and that kind of cycle just continues kind of endlessly. And it doesn't really lead to wisdom. It just leads to a very, it leads to distraction and anxiety over time. It's kind of a stressful life. So Buddha was trying to say, well, don't do that. Look and see, okay, that's distracting. That's leading you to distraction. That's leading you to be heedless and not mindful. It leads you to anxiety. So what you want to do instead is you want to spend some time to recognize yourself and see yourself more clearly. Meditate. We have recitations, another method. And what that does is help us collect our thoughts. And we'll find in the beginning it's not easy, but after, it's very interesting. But your body, I would say, recognizes this is actually how it's supposed to be in about a week's time. So you have to give yourself about a week, because it takes a little bit of time to detox. So if you get a chance to go and visit a monastery, we have our sessions, or if you go out into nature and you go camping for a week, I think at the end of the week you feel some kind of happiness that you really don't know how to explain. And that's our kind of inherent kind of capacity is kind of re-emerging again, whereas before it was kind of smothered over.
So recently at the City of 10,000 Buddhas, our main campus in Ukiah, we had, how many was it, 24 students from the colleges, Eckert and Lewis and Clark. And after a week of the atmosphere at the City of 10,000 Buddhas and being away from their phones and their tablets and their computer screens, they were actually apprehensive. They realized the hold that being connected had on them. And being away from that for one whole week made them feel really liberated. And they were actually apprehensive of having to go back to their normal lives and surrendering themselves to this constant barrage of information and feeling the need to be connected to your friends at every single moment.
So here in this sutra text, when he talks about the bodhisattva progressively cultivating a way to ever higher purity, the bodhisattva is actually far beyond the stage that we're talking about. This is where we're at. We're trying to, use less computers, use less phones, not be so scattered, not be so jealous. The bodhisattva is in many ways far beyond that. He's cultivating at a much more subtle place in his mind, the subtle thoughts, the subtle movements of something that I would say for most of us, at least for myself, we probably don't even really see, because it comes from this stillness of mind that once we can remove those gross afflictions, then we see more subtle movements of mind. Bit by bit, we can get deeper and deeper in our minds. And so that's the purpose of our cultivation, is basically being able to penetrate deeply. That's the heart. Maybe next line. So we can read the sutra text together.
Wait.
Which one going?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's okay.
You finished with afflictions?
Well, you probably talk about.
Okay. The reason why afflictions are important is that we want to stop them from becoming obsessions, like jealousy, hatred. Those are very strong obsessions that has a that has energy. Seemingly, it seems like it has an energy of its own, but in fact, it draws its energy from the opportunity that you give it in the first place. So what happens is your mind opens up, and it starts with recurring thoughts of, say, if you're speaking about jealousy or anger, you keep on thinking about a particular person or a particular situation, and then your thoughts generate more and more momentum. And before you know it, what was just a mere emotion, through your own volition, you make it stronger. You give it a momentum of its own. It's almost like, when a kid has that the toy fan, that some people put in the garden, and you blow it, and it turns, and the more you blow it, more. Imagine something that you blow on, and that's the thoughts in your mind. If you're not careful, and if you don't say, have some form of contemplative practice where you start to recognize the thoughts that emerge from your mind, and you believe those thoughts to be real, you start creating a reality that you follow, and you perpetuate that reality by giving it more thoughts. And before you know it, you fall into a state of obsession. And then that's when you start doing crazy things, or when you start feeling really, really unhappy, and it feels as if you can't do anything about it. So that's why afflictions are important. But if you can turn them around, the Brahma Master will say, afflictions are just bodhi, which is another word for wisdom. If you recognize your afflictions, and you can overcome your afflictions, then you've turned that affliction into wisdom. And that's all there is to it. It's very simple. And then from then on, you are always in control of yourself. But you always have to be mindful. Yeah. So as we go along, I will use the Shurangama Sutra as a basis for today, because we are speaking about purity. It's important to note that the Buddha isn't saying that you have to do this. He's not saying that at all. All the Buddha is saying is that if this is what you want, if you want less stress from life, if you want to be able to get out of the circle of birth and death, if you want to be in control of yourself, and not let your emotions and your thoughts control you, this is what you can do. Okay, bear that in mind. So, and the Buddha says, as he's explaining this, he says that to get there, to get to being in control of your thoughts and your emotions, he says there are the 3 non-outflow studies, which are precepts, samadhi, and wisdom. So what are precepts? Precepts are a set of guidelines that help you not create trouble for yourself. For example, you would tell a child not to juggle with knives, or any adult for that matter. Don't play with sharp things, or, because if you do and you don't know what you're doing, what's going to happen? You're going to hurt yourself. So precepts are like that. They're meant for people to live their lives by, so they do not create harm for themselves and for the people around you. Maintaining precepts is actually an excellent way to be a responsible member of a family, or to be a responsible brother, sister, husband, wife, father, mother, or a friend. And what are the precepts? I'll go through them as we go through. But before I go to the precepts, let me explain a bit more about what precepts, samadhi, and wisdom are. We have 5 main precepts for lay people. So do not kill, do not steal, do not lie, no sexual misconduct, and no taking of intoxicants. For monks like ourselves, we have 250 bhikshu precepts. And then for lay people as well as monks, we have the bodhisattva precepts, and which are meant to expand your heart and your mind as the first stage in walking the bodhisattva path. It's meant to expand our mind so that we are not so selfish, so that everything that we do, we always considering the people around us, rather than just what I have to gain to do this, if I do this. But you think about other people as well. So where I'm going with this is that precepts, if we treat precepts seriously, what happens is as we go about our daily lives, we would always be mindful of the precepts. When I was given the opportunity to take the 5 precepts as a layperson, without knowing it, I was already mindful of the precepts because my first thought was, no, I'm not going to take the precepts. Because at that time I had my own business, and I was thinking that the 5 precepts would just restrict the way I would do business. I mean, I can't lie. It's really hard to do business if you can't lie. I can't drink. So what if I need to entertain my clients, and if I want to bring them out to have a good time? I can't kill, but in our organization, no killing also means being a vegetarian. That means not having living beings die just so that you can fill your stomach. And I think, but I love eating meat. Why would I want to take the 5 precepts? So that's the function of precepts. Precepts help you be mindful of your thoughts and your actions. So that creates mindfulness. And the other function of precepts is that if you maintain the precepts long enough, you have a very sublime peace of mind that you know, that you carry with you, because you know that you have not created harm in your everyday speech, in your everyday actions, and in your everyday thoughts. So what happens is that when you combine these two and you sit down and you try to meditate, it's very easy to enter into concentration or samadhi. And when you can enter into concentration and you can see your own thoughts arising in your mind, thoughts of anger, thoughts of greed, thoughts of hatred, thoughts of ignorance, you eventually realize that the thoughts are not you. And if you combine that with wisdom of the Buddha's teachings, for example, like coming to the lecture tonight and understanding this, or reading the sutras and the Buddha's teachings on your own, that eventually leads to real wisdom, which comes from within you. So the Buddha's teachings are all based on these 3 non-outflow studies. You first need precepts. Precepts are really, really important. And as we'll go through the 4, what we call the 4 unalterable instructions on purity, since tonight's theme is on purity, in case you haven't guessed that yet, is that the Buddha also has wonderful analogies about if you don't have precepts, and if you continue having defilement and filth, and if you try to practice, it is akin to, I will come to, is one of the analogies he uses, like boiling sand in the hopes of getting rice. So I say you can, if you don't have precepts, you can boil, and if you cultivate Chan Samadhi, you can boil sand. It's like boiling sand. You can boil the sand for eons, and you will still end up with sand. There's no way the sand will turn into rice. So that's the analogy for cultivation without precepts. Okay. So what was the so what's the first one that the Buddha said? Lust, or sensual desire. So the Buddha said that if you want to cultivate Chan Samadhi, or Zen meditation, and it extends to all forms of holding the Dharma doors, if you have not eliminated all sensual desire from your mind, you will still revolve in birth and death. You will forever be revolving on the cycle of birth and death. And not just that, he says that at best, and these are the Buddha's words, he says, one will be a demon king in the heavens. On the average, one will be in the retinue of demons. And at the lowest level, one will be a demon among people. So what did the Buddha say this? It's not meant to scare people, but just meant to show that on this ground, the intention is really, really important. And if you cultivate with an intention that is not straight and true, that guiding principle will follow you, and you will just reap the effects of the causes that you plant. So if you plant a cause that is not true, and you go off, it will take you to where you're pointing to. So we just came back from the chiropractor today, and one of the things that I've learned is that my hips are they're not straight, they're kind of misaligned. And I used to think that one of my legs was short, but actually it was my hips that were misaligned. And what happens is that when I sit in meditation, because my hip is moving one way, then my body compensates by moving the other way, and then my head compensates by looking the other way. So if you look at me when I meditate and when I'm really relaxed and I'm not mindful of my body, I'm kind of like this. And it's not straight. And that's harmful. It just leads to, say, energy blockages and pain, unnecessary pain and discomfort when I meditate. So that's just a slight analogy for saying if you are true and if you hold a posture that's straight, then everything functions well. But the moment you're off and then you start compensating, in the end you're all crooked and you end up nowhere. And then the second thing that the Buddha, so for lust or sensual desire, the Buddha used the analogy, if you don't cut it off and your intention is to get out of the realm of birth and death, then it is like cooking sand in hopes of getting rice. You will never get anywhere. And you will hear that a lot. That analogy is used a lot. And then the second one that the Buddha said was killing. The Buddha said, if living beings in the 6 paths of any mundane world had no thoughts of killing, they would not have to follow a continual succession of birth and death. So if you can eliminate all thoughts of killing, and that extends to thoughts of anger, hatred, ill will, any thought of harming people or beings, and replace those thoughts with compassion instead, then you can get out of birth and death. It's that simple. Have thoughts of compassion instead of thoughts of ill will. Right? And that's all you need. And the analogy that the Buddha used for this was, let me see, says, if cultivators of Chansamani do not cut off killing, they are like one who stops up his ears and calls out in a loud voice, expecting no one to hear him. Okay, don't shout. And it also extends if you have a heart of compassion, and you can see this in a lot of people, especially in California, that would extend to, say, not using animal products or byproducts. And that's why a lot of monastics are also vegan. Because when you use animal products, you are creating an affinity with that animal. And that affinity will just cause you to revolve more on the cycle of birth and death. And the last time I read this passage, I was a layperson. And at that time, I told myself, that means I can still take dairy products. And I've never considered myself a vegan until yesterday and today, when I've read this passage. And from the perspective of a monk. So it's not that the precepts prohibit, in the commentary on this section, the precepts do not prohibit one from taking dairy products or, say, wearing leather items or things like silk and all that. But it's just a question of how far do you want to, how serious are you in your cultivation, and how much compassion you want to train yourself to bring forth. Yeah. And then the third one was stealing. If we can eliminate greed, which is the basis of all stealing, then we too can be pure. And the Buddha says, if cultivators of Chan Samadhi do not cease stealing, they are like someone who pours water into a leaking cup and hopes to fill it. So it's like leaking cup, and you will never fill your cup. So if you want to cultivate and get out of the cycle of birth and death, or at least reduce the stresses in life, stealing is one thing. Stealing is easier compared to the rest. to give up. And then the last one is false speech. False speech also meaning speech that does not harm others, no harmful speech, no gossiping. Has anyone been on the other end of gossip? I have. And it really, really hurts. When you know that people are speaking about you in a way that's not nice, it really, really hurts. It's like being stabbed in the heart with an invincible knife. So for people who understand the harm that gossiping or ill speech can bring, then you stop doing that. So I'll just revisit what I said earlier. When I said that maintaining the precepts is an excellent way to be a responsible father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, or friend, is that if any of you had your loved ones, wouldn't you want your loved ones to have friends that maintain the 5 precepts? So you know that they will never be hurt by their friends. If you had children, wouldn't you want your children to grow up surrounded by people who maintain the 5 precepts? If I had a sister, I would want my sister to marry a guy who maintains the 5 precepts. No sexual misconduct, that means no cheating on my sister. No taking of intoxicants. He won't be a junkie. He won't come home drunk, and he won't cause a lot of problems that come from, in a lot of families that come from that. He won't lie to my sister. So if you see it from that, if you shift your perception from not yourself holding the precepts, but from other people holding the precepts, don't you think the precepts is a really good idea? So now the next step is, will I hold the precepts myself? So if anyone were to come to me and ask for marriage advice, I would say, take the 5 precepts. Marriage of vows, and take the vows of the 5 precepts. That's the way to begin a good family. But that's just me. Okay, so false speech. And the Buddha used the analogy, let me see. Okay, says, Ananda, one who does not cut off lying is like a person who carves a piece of human excrement to look like incense, hoping to make it fragrant. He is attempting the impossible, and for this you get 2 for 1. He gives you 2 analogies. He says that would be like a poor person calling himself an emperor. One who seeks the Buddha's way is like a person, one who seeks the Buddha's body in this way is like a person who tries to bite his own navel. How could he possibly succeed? So if we have this 4, killing, lying, stealing, and sensual desire, and we do not begin to recognize them in ourselves and take the first step in trying to just be honest with ourselves and understand the hold this have over us, then we will forever be revolving on the cycle of birth and death. So that's all the Buddha is saying. So Buddha says, if you want to get out of the stress of life, then this is where you begin. You take the precepts and then you tune your mind inwards and you start looking at your actions and how you react to everyday situations. And then you just start from there. So you start small. You start really small, just in your thoughts, and then you expand them and expand them. And then one day when you sit in meditation, you'll be the Buddha.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
and the Buddha also said, and Ramabasa said, this is how you spot demons. If you are going around looking for a teacher, if you are looking for someone who you want to learn wisdom from, use these 4 things. Use the precepts as, he calls it, a mirror spotting wisdom. A demon spotting mirror. Yes. Use these 4, or use the 5 precepts as a mirror to judge the people who you want to learn from. Do they advocate sexual desire or sensual desire? Do they say it's fine? Do they say eating meat is fine? Do they say lie? Are they greedy? Do they themselves want money? So use these 4 as a mirror to see if this is the person you want to get advice from. Yeah.
So the idea is about, going back, it's about purity. And so the title of this, I think in Chinese, is 四种清净明慧. And in English, I don't know how they translate, 4 unalterable aspects of purity. Yeah. So basically, that this is definite. You can rely on this. These 4 elements of teachings, which he just listed, are how you become pure and pure in your heart. And the reason is because those 4 are listed is because they're actually considered precepts of our nature. They're inherent in our, you can say, our awakened nature. And naturally we would hold these, but only because we get confused that we follow something else. We follow, you could say, afflictions or habits of mind that are destructive. And so this whole idea that Jin-He was just explaining was basically how we get back to purity. And these are, I would say, the big bright roads. This is the easiest way back. And this is where we should look. And so, actually, just to do a little bit more time, we can go over a couple more of the afflictions. Another 2, if you want to add some more afflictions to the list, that relates to that Jin-He just talked about, is there's 2 called, you could call it no conscience, or you can say no shame. Another one's no remorse, or no sense of fear for moral wrongs, or doing wrong. And those are, there's 2 actual, there's actually 2 qualities. So one's a kind of self-recognition of wrong, and the second was a kind of an embarrassment towards other people when you do something wrong. And in Buddhism, it's actually seen as a wholesome quality. The sense of conscience is because it's a cultivated sensitivity that when we are just living our lives, all of a sudden, sometimes we just know, I did something wrong. I said something, or I gossiped, and I hurt that person's feeling. And we know that inside. And that sense is actually a very good sense. That's like our moral compass. It kind of guides us in the right direction. And then from there we can apologize, or we can ask for forgiveness, or we can, make a resolve not to do it again. However, Buddhism very, very much emphasizes, don't then get into the mindset of regret, in the sense of, oh, you did something wrong. Let's say we did something that hurt somebody else, and then we start beating ourselves over for it, over and over and over again. That's just considered an attachment to something. So the initial reaction of a recognition of something wrong is actually a very wholesome thing that we should go, oh yeah, I did something wrong. Then we should use that energy to change for the better, or to do something that we can let it go and not cover it over. And so in Buddhism, that's the practice. It's basically, oh, I did something wrong, let me change it. The 4 that were just listed, I would say, are the main places to look, because those 4 are so fundamental to our true nature. The no lust, or not running after sensual desire, no killing, no harming or ill will, no stealing, and no false speech. Especially not putting on airs, basically praising ourselves or trying to exaggerate about our abilities.
And what Jin-Chuan just mentioned, the feeling of shame and remorse, is a really important mechanism in Buddhism. If you look at it in isolation, it doesn't make much sense. But if you understand, say, for someone trying to hold the precepts, and if you're really serious about holding the precepts, which is how it should be, and then you may inadvertently, due to your habitual way of speaking, you may say a lie, or you may be, in your understanding of a situation, you may feel compelled to lie because you feel that it is justified. But at the same time, because you're mindful of the precepts, you know that it is not something that you should have done. So instead of feeling regret, which is basically what Jin-Chuan said, beating yourself up over it, you transform that energy, which is supported by a feeling of shame that you have broken your own vow of taking the precepts. And what you do with that negative energy is that you transform it into something positive and say, okay, I did not manage to keep the precepts this time, but I will try harder next time. So you look forward to the time where you will try harder and you will do your best. So it's always a case of doing your best, given what you have. So the precepts are meant to rehabilitate a person and meant to draw a person towards purity. it doesn't mean that the moment you take a precept, you are pure. But it does mean that you try your best. But if you cannot, and your best fails in that situation, then you tell yourself, I will try again harder. The next time this happens, I will try again. I will try my best. And that's how you improve. The sense of wanting to always try your best and having that direction, that moral compass that precepts gives you, and then you work towards there. Because the last thing that you want is to become discouraged from holding the precepts, because holding the precepts is not easy. From my experience, it's not easy because you have your whole lifetime of habitual way of communication. You communicate your emotions. Sometimes your emotions, you want to hurt someone because you have a lack of respect for someone. And your communication shows that, and then you feel sorry. So it's not meant to beat you up, but it's meant to pull you towards wholesomeness all the time. And having good friends help. Because if you have good friends, that's why a lot of people like to come to the monastery and hang out, because you hang out with people who have the same value system as you do. It's like hanging out with a group of your buddies or your best friends. You have a common bond of either sports or some discussion topics or poker or something else. And so you come to the monastery and you're held by a common bond of people who try their best in maintaining the precepts. And that's fun. It's wholesome. It's very different from my friends I used to and the habitual ways that we used to behave, yes.
Next sentence? What do you need more? I'll do the next line.
Oh, okay.
So the next sentence, because he resolutely seeks the Buddha Dharma and does not turn back. So I wanted to tell a story for this one. So we talked a lot about the afflictions and some principles. I think this one's a really inspiring story. If people know this, there's a Buddhist monk named Master Xuanzang. In Chinese literature, there's a book called Journey to the West, which is very famous. But that story is actually mostly focused on this kind of monkey king, who is like this very 调皮, playful, mischievous monkey who gets himself into trouble, goes and steals some longevity fruit, and so the story really centers around him a lot. But he's supposed to be one of these protectors of this monk who's going to India to look for the sutras, and so but he's actually a real person. His name is Great Master Xuanzang. And he has a very inspiring story that...
not the Monkey King, but the monk who went to the West.
The monkey of the West. The Monkey King is inspiring in his own way for mischievous, naughty kids, probably. But for monks, they probably relate more to the monk. So the monk, Master Xuanzang, basically at a very early age was very intelligent, and he learned the various classics, etc., and started studying Buddhism at a very young age. And what he found was that actually a lot of the sutra texts and the teachings were incomplete. Because at that time, I believe it was in the Tang Dynasty. So the teachings, 500 BC, 500 C Common Era. Yeah. So basically, the teachings weren't complete. They were coming over to China from India, but basically, there were sections of the sutras still missing. So. We're very blessed now that we actually have we have the whole Buddhist canon behind us, accessible. Not all of it's in English for sure, but it's here and people can actually start looking into it. But for that time, bringing a sutra over required it to go over the desert, through the mountains, or on the sea by sea, and so it wasn't so easy to bring over sutras. They don't have like a little digital CD that has a whole Tripitaka on it nowadays, and so basically. So he said, okay, I'm going to make a vow that I'm going to bring back the sutras back to China from India. And so he made this vow. And so he, at that time, the king, the law did not allow people to leave the country. And so he tried to ask for permission to leave, but from the king, who really respected him actually. But the king did not give him permission because at those times, actually, monks were almost seen as like national treasures. I guess I think the kings thought that when they kind of protected the country, they served as maybe good advisors. So I don't know if the kings always followed their advice, but they were seen as kind of like national treasures. There's even wars fought over monks, which is kind of interesting. But basically, he didn't let him leave, and so Venerable Master Xuanzang, however, was very determined, and so he basically kind of practiced secretly on his own. Master Hua tells the story. He says how he would stack up like tables and things and jump from table to table, practicing mountain climbing in his house. I can imagine that. And
He was the original rock climber.
yeah, the original rock climber. So we could do that here in the monastery. If you see in the monastery, we have little tables stacked up when people are jumping around. You know what we're doing. But so he did this for a while, and then when he was ready, he started off on his journey, and he kind of left in the middle of the night, and he started crossing the desert. And at one point when he was crossing the desert, he ran out of water, and basically was thinking like turning back and trying to get back, get some water. But in the end, he actually made a vow, which actually I wrote down the Chinese, which I thought was quite inspiring. It was basically, it's quoted, 宁向西天一步死，不愿东渡一步生. And the translation of it is, I would rather die while making one last step towards the west, that's towards India, than live by retreating one step towards the east. So in his journey, basically, at that point just resolved, I'm just going to keep going west, regardless of whatever happens. Even if I die doing this, I'm not going to try to go back and see what happens. And so the story it was pretty miraculous, because he has a journal he kept. Basically, his horse found this kind of oasis. Like he got some water and then continued on his journey. And so many situations like this, which were kind of like life-threatening, and with his kind of will of not retreating and not going backwards, he just kind of made it to India. Learned many of the sutras there, many of the great teachings there, and then came back and brought a lot back to China, and is very, very renowned for his journey. And then they have the story of the journey to the west, which is based on his journey, and kind of stars the Monkey King.
As I was growing up, I had this set of comic books that was precisely this, Journey to the West. And since then, all the mass media depictions of Journey to the West always depicts the monk, Venerable Xuanzang, as being a very timid monk who can't even help himself. But if you understand his actual story, that is as far from the truth as you can get. He is the original, fearless hero who, because he wants to bring back the Buddhist canon to benefit living beings in China, he's willing to sacrifice even his life. And he embarks on this amazing journey alone across deserts that if you even were to attempt today, you would probably die. Yeah, and so they developed this story about how, because it was such a miraculous journey, that he had help from bodhisattvas, spirit protectors who were helping him complete the journey. And that's how the Monkey King, and the Monkey King had another, there was a person with the face of a pig, and there's another one with a huge belly with a I remember the cartoons that I read quite vividly. He had a staff with like a moon, a crescent moon as a weapon, and these three were actually spirits helping him complete his journey, because what he did was so miraculous. Yeah.
I have to say, those cartoons don't do monastic life justice at all. I don't think I remember watching those as a kid as well. The monk was not inspiring to the least. Didn't make a monastic life inspiring at all. But I'll say, if you really read his story, and people, for instance, even know Master Hua was the founder of the organization, when you see their lives, they come from they're made of different stuff. There's something that you can see in their character and in their fortitude that's like, wow. Literally here it says, he resolutely seeks the Buddha Dharma and does not turn back. Meaning, whatever difficulties come, they don't turn away from it and run away from fear. They just keep moving forward. They say, when you take the monastic vows, they give us a quote which goes, when you're going off to battle, cultivating the way is like going off into battle. Basically it's one person against 10,000 enemies. And you go into battle solo, kind of like probably in the Lord of the Rings. You got all the armies coming out. You have a couple guys at the front gate, right? And so you're facing that army, and it says some people retreat at the very beginning. Some people get halfway and then retreat. Some people get in the midst of the battle and then get slain, and some people return victorious. And so it's a kind of a exhortation. When you're going to go against the battle against the enemies of affliction, which is the previous passage, that we're basically going against what looks like 10,000 enemies. And if we were resolute and don't turn back, we can actually return victorious. That's the spirit. So basically that's what we want to do, is don't turn back, just keep moving forward.
An interesting anecdote to Venerable Xuan Chang's journey to the West is he kept very detailed records as he went through all the different lands, and Indian historians have based the history of India on his writings, because when he went back to China, his journals were preserved, and a lot of the Indian history was lost through I'm not sure, I don't have the details.
They don't write. In Indian culture, everything's wasn't written down, so that's why they didn't have written records. Well, the Chinese write down everything. So
in trying to reconstruct Indian history, they actually use Venerable Master Sang's writings because it was really accurate for what happened during that time. And the afflictions that monks, that we are supposed to kill, the 10,000 hordes of demons, are all in here. As we sit down, as we go through our everyday lives, as we be mindful, every thought is all here. Yeah, it's not that we go do kung fu or something.
Kung fu. But they have also analogies saying what do we get when we go out to battle? We have the armor of the precepts. We have the sword of wisdom. So cultivating the precepts keeps us protected. So the next line, the next line is, he keeps thoughts of kindness and compassion without ever growing tired. So for those who are familiar with the four Brahma Viharis, or the four limitless minds, basically there's things that we cultivate to develop, you could say, a broad, compassionate. They literally say this is where the gods dwell. This is where the gods live. So if we want to be more heavenly, quote unquote, be more like the heavens, there's the four minds which are. Can I see? Oh, yeah.
I'll just read this before Jin-Chuan gets to the four minds to show why these are important. For those of you who are, one of the reasons why I became a monk was because that a lot of things that I saw in the world were kind of depressing. For example, political situations. It doesn't matter where you come from. Usually, most countries have very depressing political situations. The environment, the state of culture of people. I could see the way when I was young and in my 20s and 30s how things were changing. Basic family values were getting lost, and things were not the way it was, and the environment and global warming, etc. So for all of you who feel that you want to make a difference, either in the environment or anything in the world that you would like to change for the better, you should hear what the Venerable Master has to say about the four unlimited minds. He says, if each one of us wants to change the dire situation of the world, we must change from the evil to the good, change our faults and renew ourselves. This will help the world return to a wholesome state of being. But if we don't change our faults and renew ourselves, then the world can only get worse and worse each day. And each day there will be an especially large number of calamities and disasters. So if we want to return this kalpa to a state of goodness, we should become replete with a heart of compassion. Everyone should at all times maintain a heart of great compassion and be filled with kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. thereby imitating the 4 unlimited minds of the Buddha. How can one be replete with kindness, compassion, joy, and giving? This is where I hand the mic back to.
So, actually, first, before we do that, I just want to make sure people know what those 4 are, so that it's very clear. Because actually, Buddhism, what I actually like about Buddhism is actually very precise, and it's because it's trying to actually describe our experience. So what it's trying to do is especially when you're listening to us speak, hopefully, if we're doing a relatively good job, is that when we're explaining something, you can identify that experience in your own process. So for instance, when he says sympathetic joy, which is one of the four limitless minds, what it means is that experience when I see somebody else successful and I'm happy for them, or they're happy and I'm happy for them. That's that experience. So the Buddha is pointing that if you can cultivate that mindset of wishing others, to be being happy when they're happy, that's that mind. The first one usually on the list is called karuna, or compassion. And that literally means pulling people out of suffering. When people are in some difficult, dire straits, well, you help them out. You make it so they relieve their suffering. And so kindness has actually a very clear definition as well. It's mudita in Sanskrit, and what that means is bestowing happiness. So one is taking people out of suffering, that's compassion, and one's bestowing happiness. So here he says he keeps thoughts of kindness and compassion without ever growing tired. So he's always bestowing happiness, and he's always relieving beings of suffering. You can read it that way. So those are 2 of the limitless minds. The third one is sympathetic joy, which is, I believe, I don't think I got my Sanskrit word for that. And then so sympathetic joy, which I explained, and the last one is upekkha, which is equanimity, or sometimes it's translated as renunciation or giving. But it comes, basically it's saying you have this mind that's equal and level. It's not biased. So it's really, when we talk about all this about non-discrimination in America, and we really try to be non-discriminating, in Buddhism you really get there from being cultivating equanimity. It's not through, I don't know how to. I would say society has maybe some ways of trying to make things more fair, but in the end, I would say it's not an ultimate way. In Buddhism, ultimately, how we do it is if we can really cultivate a mind that sees living beings all equally, and we care for all of them equally, that really develops that heart of non-discrimination. And so that's the 4th one, which is a kind of a calm, peaceful mind of equanimity.
So equanimity also means you're cool with everything. Anything comes your way, you're cool. When you look at people, you're cool. So no matter if, like the Bodhisattva just wants to help people, and they understand that people do dumb things because they don't have the wisdom of the Buddha to rely on. They don't understand cause and effect. So there are people who do things like murder, and people who do other dumb things. So a Bodhisattva, because he has a mind of equanimity, it doesn't matter what you do. The Bodhisattva will still help you. So he's not fazed by what you do or the thoughts in your mind, because he knows that one day, given enough help, you will change. So you could be someone who other people may despise or look down upon. But the Bodhisattva is just cool, it's just, okay, you need help, I will help you. Even if you're someone who's really good, he will still help you. So that's equanimity. And if we have friends, if all our friends are really cool, that would be nice. No matter what you do, they're always nice towards you.
So also from the Master Hua's commentary, it talks actually about 3 kinds of compassion. And one of the types of compassion is basically, you could say, that of ordinary people. We have thoughts of compassion to those who are close to us, our parents, our friends. And so when we see them in trouble, we want to help them out. That's very natural. That's the idea of ours, of our sense of compassion. And oftentimes it's, for ordinary people, it usually just extends out to our own species. We have a kind of a care and concern for other humans when we see them suffering. But sometimes we don't quite see it when other species are suffering. This is why Buddhism really emphasizes vegetarianism, is because we're trying to extend our circle of compassion to all beings, not just human beings, because we don't eat humans, so we try not to eat animals either. Hopefully, we don't eat humans. And so basically, that's the first. That's can I say that's the first stage. At least we want to start with ourselves, our family, our friends, and hopefully to those we don't know, and maybe even to people we don't like. This kind of sense of wishing them well and wishing that they will be free of suffering. So that's the first kind, that of ordinary people. The next one that he describes is that of the arhats, or the call them sometimes the sound hearers. And what they are is they have ended the cycle of birth and death. They've been able to see to the true emptiness, or not true emptiness. They see the emptiness behind phenomena, how everything is in constant change and flux, and based on conditioned. It's nothing truly there. And so they go out and have a sense of compassion and caring for other people, but they're completely unattached. So they're not attached to, I'm helping you out. Rather, they see that they're just giving, but they're not attaching to that act of giving. For us, oftentimes when we give, we still have a very strong sense, I'm giving you this object, and you're receiving it from me, and I'm going to be a great benefactor or a giver of something. Well, the arhat doesn't have that thought at all. It's just naturally something that happens. And then the next, you would say the greatest way to develop compassion is that of the bodhisattva. And since the quote is actually really good, so I'll actually read it. It says, great compassion through understanding the identical substance of all beings. In Chinese, it's tong ti da bei. Basically, same body, great compassion. We're all one body. We're all connected. And so here the Master's commentary goes, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have yet another kind of compassion. The Buddha's Dharma body pervades all places, and so the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are of one substance with all beings. The Buddha's heart and nature are all pervasive, and all beings are contained within it. So you see, all beings is part of our nature. Nothing's outside. Our true mind, our true Buddha nature encompasses it all. So your suffering is my suffering. There's no difference. Right? It says, we are living beings within the Buddha's heart, and he is the Buddha within our hearts. Our hearts and the Buddha's are the same, everywhere throughout the 10 directions, north, east, south, west, to intermediary directions above and below. Therefore, the Buddha and living beings are of the same substance, without distinction. This is called great compassion. So that's the Bodhisattva's great compassion, is being of one substance with living beings. And that's kind of the ideal we're shooting for. We're trying to get to a place where we can kind of see all people, all beings as part of me.
So if you were to think that that's the state of a Buddha and a Bodhisattva, actually that's not quite true. And we can do a quick thought experiment. Just as if we expand our minds just a bit, and just as we have our motivations for life, we too want to be happy. I want to be happy. And I want to be successful. And I want to be always surrounded by people who like me. I want to make people happy. I want to have no worries about life. And those very basic things that motivate you are the same things that motivate everyone else. So everyone's motivation is all the same. If you go beyond the form that we have, and if you expand your mind to go beyond everyone's ego and their life experiences, which most people take to mean who they are, like the way I grew up. My narrative in life has shaped me to be who I am. If you look past all those superficial differences, you find that everyone's the same. Everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to not suffer. And just from that thought alone, you can understand how the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas see all living beings. Because everyone's motivation is the same. Everyone wants to live. Nothing wants to die. Who wants to die so that another person can live? just to satisfy that person's greed. No, I mean, if you try to kill a chicken or an animal, if you are not a vegetarian, and then you should visit, a slaughterhouse where they kill animals. You will see that all animals want to live just as all humans want to live. So just based on that, you can have an idea. Of course, the Buddha and the Bodhisattva state is far greater than this, to the extent that they are totally selfless in helping living beings. But just within our own minds, we can see how everyone is motivated by the same thing. And from there, we can also begin to develop compassion that's greater than ourselves for the living beings around us. And that's very good when it comes to dealing with afflictions, because if we can see living beings, in Nagarjuna Bodhisattva, in one of his shastras, he gives a lot of ways to deal with people who have animosity against you. Says you can see them as your teachers, they're trying to teach you patience. You could see them as your family members and treat them with patience and compassion. You could see them, depending on what works. So he gave a list of almost 20 things. Let me see if I have that list. Since we were going through a lot of afflictions, see them as your teacher. Since we went through some of the list, it would be
as karma.
Helpful.
Is this repaying a debt?
Repaying a debt, yes. Kind of like if you borrow money from someone and that person comes to ask for this money back, it would be really funny to get angry with a person. So if you understand cause and effect and how that works, then anything that happens to you is a result of conditions that you planted in a previous life. So that helps you cope with things that happen to you now. You can also treat people with compassion. For example, all living beings suffer. No one is really truly happy. So if I fight back with this person, or if I make this person unhappy, how can I have the heart to add to a person's suffering if it's already suffering? So there are a lot of ways to help someone not be controlled by emotions, and then eventually have the emotions become afflictions, and then that the afflictions become obsessions that control your life, and then make you do dumb things that you regret later and you can't take back. So, yeah. Is that all? Do you want to show a video?
Yeah, we can show the short video of the. So tonight we have couple videos for people. Jerry just returned back from Australia and visited River Heng Sure there. And so he made a video. I think he was requested to make a video of Gold Coast Monastery, Dharma Monastery down in Australia, where River Heng Sure is right now. And so he has a very nice video of that. I think he has probably some music clips of River Heng Sure as well. We also have one of the laymen in the monastery here sent me this video clip. It's actually a very heartwarming clip about giving. It's a Thai commercial.
Yeah, it's actually a commercial. So
is it actually a real commercial? Yeah, it's a real commercial.
So just disregard the last 2 seconds. Watch everything, and then when the last 2 seconds come up, just say, Yeah.
It's actually nice to see commercials like that. I don't think I've seen a commercial like that in America. Well, you'll see what I mean when you actually watch the commercial. Are we good? Okay. So we'll do it right now. Let's do it right now. What do we usually do? We usually transfer now. We transfer now. Okay, and then we can put the screen down. Okay. So Alan will be able to give us some musical accompaniment.
Alan's guitar skills have steadily improved. From the first time where he missed maybe 5 out of 20 notes, now it is very, very steady. Jerry call it a modern instrument.
Yeah, the dedication of merit is on the back of your paper. It says dedication of merit. And this particular practice is a chance to give away, the kind of happiness in studying the Dharma, any goodness that was created, and we basically send out a wish for something in the world to be better. or say we want to give it to a family member.
You could wish for, may I be surrounded always by people who hold the 5 precepts.
So. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless life. Because our hearts are one, this world